Brilliant. Sorry. Um, yeah, I've got so much. Everything you say I kind of have like 1,000 different questions that sort of come into my brain when you're speaking. Okay, so talking about chronic pain, long-term beliefs, long-term experiences of pain. What about sort of shorter, not shorter, but sort of more intensive, like two things that spring to mind are sort of childbirth,
Yeah.
which I've spoken to, um, not a vast number of people, but a number of people who've given birth, and a lot of um, their of they some of them have said yes, this is the most painful thing I've ever experienced in my life. But it's always been sort of tempered by the fact that it has like a sort of finite time period, but also there's a result at the end, there's a conclusion.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very similar experience to maybe like because used to run ultra marathons, is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the idea that you have this sort of finite period of pain, and at the end there's like the result, the sort of um uh yeah, the conclusion. Um
Yeah.
so how do you sorry, so many questions in one question, but the first one being what kind of are you generally catering to people experiencing chronic pain? Um like who's your audience, your clientele, all the wrong words, sorry. Um
Yeah.
so how would you then um coach, tutor towards finite periods of pain versus would there be a difference in your approach between a finite period of pain and a chronic, long-term, forever, whatever pain?
Yeah. 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 I mean, the experience is quite different in many ways because the expectations are different, as you said, with childbirth, and clearly I don't have an experience of that myself.
Mm,
But those two factors are big, aren't they? I mean, there's a particular reason why you're there. There's a biology in action, and yes, it's obviously a painful experience, but it shows that the context really matters, and there are certain contexts where pain and pleasure sort of sit quite close together. This sort of the contrasts of it are what people are deciding to engage with, which is quite which is interesting. Or as you said, using an ultra marathon is inevitably painful, and it's not the thing that puts you off. It's something that you learn to deal with in different ways.
mm,
Ultimately by just keeping going. And it sort of I mean, I always remember when before I'd started doing those things, I went to pick up a friend of mine who was doing a 100K run, and I was thinking, just how do you do that? I mean, it's impossible. And I suppose in many ways that belief I had then is in some ways similar to someone who's been experiencing pain for some time, and then someone comes along and says, "Do you know what? You don't have to keep doing it this way." It kind of blows you. Wow, what? How does that even work? It's no, that can't be possible because of my experiences so far. Because well, actually, all we have is our experience, really. That's all we have. So we draw on it, and often heavily, particularly if we're in an uncertain sort of situation, we will revert back to, known experiences and what to do and such like. And sometimes that's helpful, and sometimes it's not.
mm,
But then you find a way, and I can't even really remember how I didn't have a particular training program when I first started doing them, and my first ultra marathon was well, I signed up for one that was 100K. And I think I'd done a few marathons at that point. So it was kind of, I was thinking, oh, it's double that. And I thought, well, okay, to do that, I'll do one before that's broken into 2 days. So 50 odd K on each day. And that will be a nice sort of run into it. So I did that. And very quickly, I enjoyed the experience overall. I mean, obviously there's tough bits, but I enjoyed the experience overall. And that's when I thought, right, well, I'm going to do one a month now. I had that Understand Pain um, uh, campaign going, and I thought, well, that's a good way of kind of it's a good story.
Mm.
So for 2 years, I did an ultra marathon each month, which I'm possibly paying the price for now in a few ways.
Okay.
But yeah, it was amazing. It was an amazing time. But yeah, well, I mean, these things don't come without various costs because you are spending a lot of time doing that. Um, but yeah, the some of the strategies and skills will be similar because ultimately you're dealing with a moment of suffering. How can I ease my suffering? So you've got to be aware, you need to be present, and then you need some ways to deal with it. I mean, we often use the words coping and managing,
Mm.
and I I don't agree with that as an overall strategy because I don't think we need to be thinking that we have to manage and cope with our lives all the time because there's moments of joy and happiness and other times when we're not thinking about this stuff.
Mm.
But there may be particular moments where we do need to cope and manage. This is really tough right now.
Mm.
So I need ways to cope. And again, it's all skill based. And this is why I'm not anti-medication. I'm not anti medical interventions and surgeries and things like that. There just needs to be a really good reason for them.
Mm.
Um, and the person needs to be fully bought into why it's helpful, what are the risks, side effects, da, 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 they need the full picture. And they need to feel that they're deciding to do this for good reason.
Mm.
Um, and of course, there are certain conditions where medication might be really helpful and important, so autoimmune conditions and other, diagnosed conditions. Um, Certain pain relief and drugs that can be used for different types of pain can be really helpful. Um, but whether the person chooses to take those medications or not, they need to know how to live themselves better.
Mm. Yeah.
Um, one area I mean, I've been working with women in menopause suffering aches and pains for many years because that's a big bulk of people suffering. And I think this is a good example because a lot of women going through menopause who experience aches and pains, when they start taking HRT and get the right levels and their hormones are at a certain point, their aches and pains get better,
Mm.
but not all. And we can't just assume that all of the aches and pains are because of menopause and because of hormones. We need to understand them again, meet them where they are, and understand the bigger picture of their life and such like. Because it does involve the endocrine system, but it also involves a bunch of other systems as well.
Mm.
Your immune system, nervous system, I mean, they kind of work together more or less. Well, I mean, they all work together actually, to be fair, like an orchestra. So we still need to get to know the person, and they still need to know how to form habits to live themselves better. So just because the pain's got better, we can't just assume that the woman now knows, well, how much exercise, what kind of exercise, why is that important?
Mm.
How am I breathing? What about all the other stresses and strains in life that are going on? How do I handle those? Because otherwise, just taking a pill and thinking there's a quick fix. I mean, some people will go with that and they'll go, no, no, I haven't got time for that, or I don't want to do that kind of work. I don't, I just want to get on. Okay, that's absolutely fine. That's entirely your choice.
Mm.
But know that there are many ways up the mountain, ways of improving your life, and that ultimately, that pain was there as a message
Mm.
and to make a shift. And maybe part of that shift was to address a hormone imbalance, for want of a better term. But maybe it's also about a bunch of other things as well.
Yeah.
So if we want to be complete, if we want to offer the best care, if the person wants to follow the best route they can, that's what needs to be explored and worked on together.
Yeah, it's a funny bind again, isn't it? Where it's like doing, well, anything difficult is painful, isn't it, to do? As in, it's you kind of go, oh, I really don't want to do that thing. It's like,
Mhm.
and I know I'm gonna have a good time when I do it, when, or when it's over, I'm going to feel better and all those things. But there's always a resistance. Well, for me anyway, I find there's very often a resistance to, and it is like pain in a very minute sense, but that resistance to doing the thing that's going to make, and it can be a really small thing, going for a walk, cooking myself lunch, well, these things where you're like, but
Yeah.
there's a sort of pain threshold, tolerance threshold that you need to overcome in order to um do that thing. And it's in a lot of ways I can imagine, if you're in your beliefs, having to challenge them is weirdly, in a way, more painful and destabilizing than staying where it's sort of safe, even though it's painful and uncomfortable.
It could be. It could be. And again, I would be curious about that person's experience of that. Because ultimately you can also be that. You can also be curious about your beliefs about, these, I call them the wrinkles. So the lower level irritations,
Mm,
and once you become aware, once you start this process of kind of waking up and being more present, and that could be through meditation or other things, you just notice this stuff more and you notice it as an opportunity to update that program.
mm.
So in other words, if you know, I've got something I'm doing and I think, oh, I better make some lunch. Oh, that's annoying. You know, how annoying to have lunch, Um, so you can go about it with that running that program, which is essentially an addiction to wanting it another way, whatever that way is, and it's not turning up the way you want it. So that's the irritation. I mean, you might prefer it, this sort of preference. Oh, okay, yeah, I would prefer that. I mean, sometimes I use this as an analogy, and this might help. If you're going for round to some friends for something to eat, and you're wholly addicted to wanting a steak. But what they offer you kindly is a chicken pie.
Hmm.
Now, if you're addicted to wanting steak, well, then you're going to be like, oh, you're going to disengage. You're not going to be connected with them because you're so caught up with that suffering, that tension, and all the emotions that are coming with that emotion backed sort of behaviors of. So essentially, you're now separate from the rest of the people because you're just sat there fuming. Yeah. But if you've got a preference for steak and then you get chicken pie, you're like, well, inside, you're like, yeah, I prefer steak, but actually chicken pie is great and I'm present and I'm with these people. So you remain connected
Hmm.
to what's happening and the people around us. So when we look at our behaviors and what we're doing, you start to notice the times when you're disconnecting and isolating yourself, and then it's more about me, root cause of suffering, rather than us,
Mm,
like connecting and being present. One is a route of freedom and easing and ending suffering. One is a route of more suffering. You could also call it acceptance versus resistance.
mm,
I think a lot of people misunderstand the word acceptance and think that it's sort of giving in or being weak or vulnerable. Whereas actually what it means is just saying, this is what's actually happening right now.
mm,
And only by knowing what's happening right now can you address it
mm,
with clarity and calm. And if you're cultivating, the calm, balanced mind, the very still lake that reflects the moon, if your mind is able to reflect what's actually happening, you'll deal with it,
mm,
even just by being present.
mm,
So if there is suffering, you'll recognize it, know that it's impermanent because everything comes, nothing is permanent, things are always changing. And even if you don't do anything else as such, you're just with it, then you notice that it changes. And that's freedom as opposed to resistance and fight. I've got to fight this thing. I'm going
mm.
to fight my pain. The language is
Yeah.
familiar, isn't it? You're around cancer, we're going to fight it, and the charities say fight your cancer. But actually, what's interesting is the suffering is greater. When you look at the data of this, the suffering is greater
Mm,
because ultimately, what are we fighting here? Because we're always going to, if you put it on that basis, we're always going to lose. We're
mm.
always going to feel that we failed,
Yeah.
and because we're putting our measure of success into something that's out of our control and something that's inevitable.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I at a certain point in our lives, we will die. Ultimately, that's going to happen to all of us, and we're very uncomfortable with these ideas and often uncomfortable with uncertainty.
Hmm.
because it's forgotten that it's actually by life being uncertain that all the opportunities are there.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
it's through this sort of complexity, the complexity of pain again is what brings all the opportunity. And pain, use the example earlier. I mean, the thing I often say is, around pain and love is they're both excellent examples of a conscious experience.
Mm. Yeah.
One is often doubted, one is not. If I say I love something or someone, people go, "Oh, great, I'm in pain." Really? You sure? Don't
Yeah.
look like
Yeah. Stop saying so many things. I've got so many questions to.
it.
Ah. Um. uh. Okay. So the first one, the us that you were talking about, that how do you, because presumably to change then or to work with one person's beliefs, you need to work with the beliefs of all the people around them, which again is twofold. That it's on the one hand, it's the sort of limiting beliefs, but then it's also and within those limiting beliefs, I suppose, are also like is love and is protectiveness and wanting to go, don't do that, you're going to hurt yourself, you're going to and wanting to sort of look after and in that sense. And then sort of secondary to that, um I've totally forgotten what the secondary to that is. Your okay, well, let's like work with that original bit that
Yeah.
oh the then the sort of narrative that because the people around, so person in pain and the people around the person in pain also need to either be incredibly compassionate and empathetic and understand what it is, or have been through something similar enough to understand where that person's at. Um, or there needs to be some way in which that person can effectively communicate what they're feeling to the people around them, but without creating limiting beliefs.
Yeah.
Again, which is both those things must be really difficult as a sort of practitioner. I don't quite know what to call you, coach. Um, uh, yeah. So how do you sort of work with people's limiting beliefs, but also then the narratives they need to tell other people in order to be understood, I suppose.
Yeah, and I mean, they're again great insights because the relational aspect of this, which is not separate from the other bits, people will often talk to me about the difficulties they have, the struggles they have within their relationships, whether it be partners or friends and extended family, bosses, this kind of thing, colleagues, the world, clinicians, navigating it, trying to explain how you feel. And a lot of that is based on the quality of the connection between those two people. And with some people we talk about different scripts for different situations. You don't have to learn it verbatim as such, but just to have different themes. So you have different levels of explanation. When someone asks, "How are you? How are you doing?" Where you can have different levels of description depending on who they are and the situation. And ultimately it's helping the person to see that they will remember they can't control what other people do or say.
Mm,
And the programs within us will determine how we respond. People use the word triggered. Oh, they said that thing to me and it triggered me.
mm,
And what we like to do is blame the other person for what they've said rather than go, okay, well, what is my program helping me or not? In Buddhism, who's holding the burning coal here? If hours later you're still ruminating on what that person said and you're feeling angry,
mm,
well, they're probably not thinking about it, but you are. And
mm,
your issue there is your thinking, not what was said.
mm,
And this is a big shift, and it's a really important one. But even that shift often brings up resistance. But no, but they said that terrible thing. They didn't believe me.
yeah.
Um, the point is just that what you can and can't control
Mm,
really matters here because this is about you easing your own suffering.
mm,
And the more you can see it for what it is and realize that there's a program in me because someone else in that situation may have heard what that person said and just gone, well, I don't care what you think, and then not be bothered by it.
Mm.
So it's not the situation. You've got a simple formula, haven't you? You've got situation, call it A, and then you've got your thinking, call that B, and
Mm.
that equals, put those two together, and that will equals AB, which is your perception of what's happened, which is totally unique to you in that moment. Now, you can't change the situation because life turns up as it does. So you can't change A. A is A. What you can change is your thinking. So
Mm.
now that becomes C because either you're thinking in a different way or you're practiced in meditation and such like, and there's no thinking. Now you've just got the reality. You've got a situation.
Mm.
The story good, bad, who knows is, that's a parable told in different traditions, which is quite an interesting one. So, I mean, essentially, it's told in different ways, but essentially, there's a set of circumstances and they're deemed to be good. Something good happened there. But then that led to something else happening, and that was deemed as bad. Well, that was bad because we lost that, or this happened. But then because of that, it led to something good. And
Mm.
but yeah, and it goes on and on and on.
Mm.
I mean, that's life, isn't it?
Yeah.
Up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down
Yeah.
and we don't have much control over that. It just turns up. The thing we have control over is how we relate and respond,
Mm.
because I can learn to cultivate a calm mind, a balanced mind. And when I say mind, I'm not talking about something in here. I'm talking about as a whole,
Mm.
me. um Although the whole sense of self is an interesting one. But yeah, so the way that I meet these things, the way that I realize that there's some minor irritation here, that creates the opportunity for me to say, do you know what? I don't want to feel that way anymore.
Mm.
I want to change my program here.
Mm.
I want to update it. So move away from wanting things to be a particular way to saying, no, I would prefer, if you're in pain, of course you would prefer not to be.
Mm.
But if you're doing it in that way, rather than I want it to be different,
Mm.
I then you're going to be present and connect with what's around you to actually change the conditions. And it's changing the conditions that means you feel better.
Mm.
So, if the conditions are such, so if you, this is an analogy I often use with people. And, if you've got a mixing bowl, some flour, some eggs, some milk, and sugar, and you put it all in, mix it up, put it in a tin, put it in the oven, turn the oven on so it's warm. What do you get?
Cake.
Cake. Yeah.
Mm.
Some people say muffins. Some people say strange things. And I'm like, really? People
Pancake.
know? Anyway, you get something, but
Yeah.
you get what you get because of the conditions. Right?
Mm.
You're not, if
Yeah.
those are the
Yeah.
conditions,
Yeah.
you're not going to get chicken pie.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, in other words, if I'm feeling pain in my own particular way, there are a set of conditions going on. So, there's a context, there's an environment, there's a biology, there's expectations, beliefs, all of that stuff, crunch, all coming together
Mm.
in that moment as that experience,
Mm.
which is dominated by pain. There's many other things going on as well. It's not just pain, but that's the thing that's in the eye of your attention.
Mm.
Um, so, if you want chicken pie, or if you want to feel better, if you want to feel good, feel joy, feel happy, then those are the conditions to create. So if I want chicken pie, well, I need different ingredients and to do a different thing here. It's exactly the same with pain.
Mm.
So kind of looking at, well, what am I doing? Do I keep mixing up the ingredients and getting cake?
Mm.
The old adage, what got me here won't get me there.
Mm. Yeah.
And it's amazing how much we as humans we keep doing the same things but really wanting something else and getting really annoyed when the world isn't turning up the way we want it, even though we're doing similar things.
Mm.
And then getting annoyed with other people when they hold the mirror up and say, well, yeah, but what do you expect? You keep doing that.
Mm.
Then we get really annoyed with them. Yeah, but it should just change.
Yeah.
You know, this is sort of our human nature. And that's a program because we're so addicted to wanting it our way.
Mm.
And that's not a blame thing. So this is just how it seems it happens.
Mm.
Until then we wake up and realize
Mm.
we don't have to keep doing it that way. We can upgrade any of our programs or beliefs.
Mm.
And it turns out that one of the skills of being well is to have that flexibility in our biology to update those beliefs, to make better predictions about what's happening inside us that emerge as the actual experience.
Mm.
And when we get stuck, that's when these experiences are predominant, whether it be pain or addictions, anxiety, depression, these things that we get stuck with as humans.
Yeah. Would you would you ever draw any distinctions or lines around any different like mental health, physical health, chronic pain, sort of finite pain? Would you ever draw any lines around any of them and see them as separate from one another, or do they all just merge entirely for you?
No, because they're all concepts. And when I say that, I'm not saying that as they're not real and things aren't happening. There are situations happen, things are being felt and experienced. I'm not saying that at all, but they're all concepts.
Mm.
Mental health. I mean, what is that? I mean, it's just a massive umbrella term, isn't it?
Yes.
It's a bit like, Magritte's, this is not a pipe.
Mm.
And I
Yeah.
was writing about this morning as it happened because we get caught up in concepts. Of course, Zen is about losing the concepts and being closer to reality, and that's an approach that I would encourage because the more you can see things as they are,
Hmm.
the more clarity you have, the better decisions you can make,
Yeah. It
and the
must be,
more is available to you.
yeah. It must be really hard being like an international sort of association across countries, because I bet countries, you're right, they're all concepts, which means that it's language, which means that if you're in a speaking a different language, that's gonna be a different concept. Like the idea that we have, 10,000 words for rain, and other
Yeah.
languages have loads of words for snow because of our environments and our what we need linguistically. So
Mm.
it would be really interesting, wouldn't it, to understand what different countries understood by different, like the umbrella term of pain, but also the different umbrellas within that, and if they're distinct,
Yeah.
separate, or merging, or
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. But I would always bring it down to that individual. So I might be,
mm,
so I was in the subcontinent of Asia or something, and I wouldn't want to make an assumption that all the people there have a certain belief about pain. I want to know what does that person
mm,
believe right now
yeah,
about themselves and their pain. What's their narrative? What story are they telling themselves right now?
yeah,
Because that's what may need to shift and change. I mean, if they're stuck with pain, then the story always has to change. Because if you don't change the story, then you're
mhm,
going to be. And when I say no, I mean things are always changing. Impermanence, is a truism,
yeah,
but change significantly enough for that person to be able to say, yeah, life's getting better. Life's getting better for me. There's all sorts of influences, particularly now with the internet, and people can access ideas from wherever and be influenced from wherever.
mm,
But yeah, the language that someone uses, and if you're working through a translator, you've got to be aware of these things. And I mean, this is why I think that, I mean, particularly with working with people in these situations, we know that it's at least as much about your approach and way of being as it is any technique that you use. And
mm,
I know that upsets some people who are very attached to particular therapies for, they this for pain, that for pain. But I would argue that there is no particular therapy for pain because that's assuming there's a protocol or everybody's the same, and they're not. We need to listen to the person, establish, hear their story and make sense of it, establish what their needs are, what their goals are, and then offer various ways forward together once we've created a strategy in this collaboration.
mm,
So I don't believe there is a particular therapy or particular therapies for. We need to fit what we're offering to the person in their life.
mm,
Um, but we need to establish where they are and the sort of the areas of stuckness, and
mm,
then help them to shake the legs of those beliefs, to be open to
mm,
what we're offering. And I love the analogy of we're just sort of gently tapping on the door, and hopefully the person opens it, and then they might invite you in. What you don't do is go in and rearrange their furniture.
I might.
I learned that from Steve Rolnick, who's the co-founder of motivational interviewing, and I've always loved that phrase.
Yeah, yeah. What do you think about the word placebo?
It's a word, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's strangely not dissimilar to what you're suggesting, isn't it, about sort of changing beliefs, except there's like an active participation on from your in your version, and then I suppose in the placebo version there's an idea of deception. But theoretically the result should be similar in a way.
Yeah, I mean, there's a very real physiology behind placebo, and it's been well studied. You could call it the expectation effect, but sometimes, of course, people are, say, "Oh, I don't believe in that therapy. You're offering me this. I don't really believe in it, but all right, I'll give it a go." And then they notice some positive change. So there's some sort of dynamic going on there. Um, but no, placebo is something that happens. It's something. It's still not that popular in certain quarters. I think it is deception or that kind of thing. Um, but it's useful. We can harness it. It's not a negative thing. It's not voodoo. It's a way that we work, and perhaps describing things more as an expectation effect. So in other words, we bring to bear on the present moment a set of expectations about ourselves and the world, and that's largely how things then turn up.
Mm,
So we see the world as we are, not as it is.
mm,
And so your mood will determine how you view what's in front of you.
so
Not,
true.
the thing in front of you doesn't determine how you see it, or
Mm,
not to a full extent. It does a
mm,
little bit. Because
yeah,
there is a world out there, but we don't have a direct experience of it as best we know, because
mm,
our systems are generating what it's like.
yeah. That's so true, isn't it? Again, we've only got 8 minutes again, and I'm reluctant to take up all your morning, but I've got two sort of main questions left. The first
Yeah.
one is something that a nurse said to me once in hospital when I think I was refusing pain medication. Um, and she said, "Your body can't heal when you're in pain." Is that true? Is there any foundation to that?
Yeah, I mean, be curious to know what she meant by that,
Mm,
or he. Obviously, I was a male nurse, so it could be a he. But is that true as a statement? Well, pain can be part of associated with healing. If I've just cut myself or twisted my ankle and it hurts, that pain is there to get me to shift my thinking about what I need to do to look after myself in order to create the conditions for healing. Our body has amazing healing mechanisms. We don't have to do anything. In fact, we want to do less. I think one of the issues, particularly with what's called musculoskeletal care, which essentially, I mean, again, I scratch my head at the term. I mean, what does that even mean? But anyway, that aside, muscles and joints and bones and things like that. There's, I mean, it's a classic way of falling into the trap of thinking about fixing things. I'm going to go and be fixed. And it's as much about the system as the expectations about the system, because we've all been brought up to think that way. Oh, my back's out, or that sort of thing. Oh, I'll go and get it fixed. I'm going to the physio or the chiropractor, or whatever, to get fixed.
mm,
And that's not what happens. Even if someone does something to us, and all passive treatments do is temporarily change the conditions. There's no lasting effect to that. That's why they play a very limited role in something like persisting pain, chronic pain, because to overcome and transform that it's a learning process.
mm,
It's personal growth. Only like learning a musical instrument. Only you can do it. But there's a lot of fiddling around with sort of injecting things and poking and prodding. And I think actually, if we respect our body's ability to heal and we help and guide the person to create those conditions in their world where they spend most of their time, i.e., the right sort of, generally speaking, the right levels of activity and calm and rest and diet and dealing with stresses and such like that. That's the key to it.
Mm,
For me, poking and prodding someone and rubbing them and massaging them and that kind of thing, it might feel nice in the short or not. Sometimes it makes things worse. In my view, we should fiddle less and respect the body's amazing healing properties more by helping the person create those conditions.
mm,
So the pain it's a message. It's your inner coach saying, "Hey, you need to pay attention to something here." The thing is that when it comes to the point where the tissues have healed, and then there's still pain,
mm,
it's realizing that shift is not just about creating those conditions for heal. There's other stuff, there's other work to be done here. Maybe reconnecting with something or processing something, or it's very individual. There can be a million reasons, but which need to be clarified and then worked on.
mm. Gosh, yeah. And then the yeah, so yeah, I've every time I've just got like a billion things that start to sort of uh come up. The It's a big question, this one. Which is, I suppose, the different experiences of people being heard within the medical system of pain. And I think a result of that is presumably the people that you're seeing, um maybe, I don't know, maybe people that might have been not failed, but in some way sort of let down by the medical system. So I imagine that the demographic of people that you're seeing might be reflective of the people that aren't necessarily heard in hospital. But I suppose I was wondering, again, it's a big question, and I'm so aware of the time ticking down,
Mhm.
that the one narrative that I hold is that maybe women are heard less, because of, I suppose, the history of women, if you go back to sort of the 1800s, and like hysteria and the way in which sort of women's illnesses were perceived and not believed, and then the way they were treated. But I was also thinking that actually probably in some ways, might feel less able to express pain and might be dismissed more when they do express pain, because they're, the ideas of, man up and things like that. Um, but I bet there's, again, like there's so many layers to it, that it must be to do with sort of age, how sort of how much people look like they're in pain, which I found I've from in my own personal experience, noticed that I actually received sort of better care and better pain medication the less I looked like I was in pain, and the more I was able to just say, "Oh, hi, I'm feeling this. Can I get some pain?" rather than the sort of demonstrating the pain as I was feeling it, which is sort of, counterintuitive. But yeah, I was just wondering if you had any thoughts about it. Sorry, a massive question.
Hmm.
Should we should we maybe end this meeting and do another meeting, just to so I'm less worried about time?
Yeah, I mean that's a really big topic. I mean, we could chat about that in detail. I mean, just very briefly.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean that's common. The health care in inverted commas that people receive is certainly influenced by a range of factors from gender, sex, ethnicity, geography, all of these factors coming together, levels of poverty, all of this stuff is hugely influential. And this sense of not being heard, not being listened to, not taken seriously, the gaslighting, the misogyny, massive issues remain in the system, and we need to eradicate all of that.
No, that's a real yeah, quantified version. I know there's a book that I haven't read yet, called Unheard. Um
Yeah, definitely read it. It's excellent.
yeah, this is how I came across you, actually. I think you posted something on Instagram or something, and then it's sort of, I don't know, that's how I um found you. There's so I mean, we could literally talk forever. Like loss, grief, the kind of purity of pain. There's so many different versions of this, but I'm aware that actually um we must go on living. But thank you so much, honestly, for your time. Um yeah, this is totally transformative and totally transformed just my perspective of this subject. And I bet you have a massive, massive impact on so many people all the time.
Well, I hope so. I mean, that's the point. That's the purpose, is to help people to realize what they can do to make a difference. And I'm here to help and support and guide.
Mm. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time. That's brilliant, brilliant.
No, you're welcome. Well, we can keep the conversation going.
Yeah.